Washington Commanders get sold yesterday. And for LaVar, this may have more meaning considering he was a number 2 draft pick coming out of Penn State to the then Washington Redskins. Didn't get along with Daniel Snyder and the organization when he was a player. Once he left, there was a lot of acrimony involved there. And so for LaVar, this may have a different meaning for you. Hopefully you can mend fences with this new ownership group. For Plex, is it good for the league? Do you see Washington turning that culture around?
I do. I don't think it'll be immediate. But I do know that Josh Harris went on the record a few days ago and said that there will be a culture shift or change within the organization, in the near future. And basically what that means to me, if Ron Rivera doesn't have a good season this year, happen to get the Commanders to the playoffs, that means he'll probably be fired. But growing up in Virginia, and for us not having a professional team in either sport, where I'm from in Tidewater, it's full of Washington fans, and let alone D.C. I mean, it's one of the biggest fan bases in all the sports. People really don't understand how big the fan base is in D.C. and down in the DMV in Virginia, and people are happy. They are excited that Daniel Snyder is no longer the owner of this football team. And, I can't really speak on the culture that he, started or went through his tenure while he was the owner, but I just been hearing nothing but negative things in the culture that he created. So a lot of people are excited from that standpoint. And lastly, to put a product on the football field that can compete, because they really haven't been relevant in the NFC East or the conference for the last 20 years. So moving forward, I think there will be a facelift soon, maybe not this year, but in the coming future.
It's interesting. And listen, I could be one of those guys to pile on. I've already did my I told you so's for years. I've said I told you so for years. I've said this is who the dude is for years. And I wanted to make sure that I separated Daniel Snyder from the organization as a whole and the community and the fan base and the players as a whole. This was not a Washington football team scenario that was horrible. It wasn't the players were horrible, the fans were horrible, the cities were horrible. And when you say the cities, you got the district, you got, Plex mentioned the Tidewater. Our fan base runs down even into Carolina because there wasn't a football team in Carolina. So our fan base runs all the way down into Carolina, all the way up into Maryland. And so when you talk about the DMV, you got Maryland, you got the District of Columbia, and you got Virginia. Our fans are loyal. They're tremendous. They're very, very energetic, and it was amazing. Like thinking about when you're going to be a high draft pick. I decided to come out early because my draft grade was really high. And it had me going in the top 10, and they were projecting me to go 1 or 2. And in that 1 or 2 scenario, you think about it, I didn't want to go to Cleveland. I told them, y'all got to pay me quarterback money if I'm coming to Cleveland because I probably won't get another big deal because I'm going to be in Cleveland. And we're going to lose. And then what does a second contract look like? What does an extension look like? Like, y'all got to pay me up front. And that was when you could still negotiate before you were the first pick. Then you're staring at Washington at 2 and 3. Now think about this. Washington had just went to the playoffs. They had just went to the playoffs in a divisional round, and so seemingly they were on the ups. Dan Snyder had just taken over the team. All right? Now think about this piece of it. You have Brad Johnson at quarterback, starting quarterback. You have Stephen Davis, big country in the backfield as your tailback. You have Skip Hicks as the backup to him, which was an amazing
UCLA
1-2 pick, right? And then you have Michael Westbrook. You got Albert Connell on the outsides. You have a John Jansen anchoring your offensive line and Corey Raymer at center. You have on the defensive side of the ball, you have Champ Bailey. You have Darryl Green. On the other side of the ball, you have Sean Barber. You have Sam Shade as safety. They had the makings of a Super Bowl roster before they even went into Daniel Snyder's first draft. Daniel Snyder's first draft pick ever was me. I was his first draft pick. So coming into the scenario, fellas, I'm looking at it like if I can't get to where Plex ended up at 8, I for damn sure want to go to D.C. because my family's from Virginia too. They're from Rocky Mount. So my whole family is either Steelers fans or Washington. Back then they were the Redskins, now Commanders. And so I grew up with John Riggins, a painting that my Uncle Gerald did, my Uncle Brad. He did a painting of Darryl Green, John Riggins, and a tight end. I don't even know who it was. I had them on my wall my entire time growing up. My entire time. I had Jack Lambert on my door, and I had these pictures that my uncle painted on the top of my wall in my room. So I was almost destined to be a Washington. And listen, I know we can't, it's improper to use Redskins, but I'm just going to paint a picture here because I'm getting to your point. When I played Pee Wee League football growing up in Westview, I played for the Westview. The first team I ever played for was the Braves. The second team that I ever played for was the Redskins. And the third team I played for was the Chiefs. When I went to high school, which was the feeder league to my high school, I was a North Hills Indian. I was an Indian. So outside of middle school, when I was on the north side with the Columbus, shouts out to the north side, I was a Cougar, which is funny because I ended up being a Nittany Lion, right? So I was a big cat all my life, and I've been an Indian all my life. My entire basketball or my entire football career, I was either an Indian or a cat. That was my trajectory. So then I end up going in the draft to the Washington football team, and my relationship was so tight. I developed such an amazing relationship with Dan Snyder. Now, people didn't know that. People may not have known that, but me and Dan in the beginning, we were really, really tight. And so we'd be on the team trips, team flights. I'd sit with Dan. Who was Dresner, the other owner, he would get up, he'd go sit somewhere else and talk to some people, and I would sit with Dan. We would play chess, we'd talk, BS around, different things like that. I often tell the story when his father was ill in the hospital, I'd go sit with him. I'd be in the hospital with his mother and with his dad, who he had failing health. I would sit with them. When he eventually passed on, I was a pallbearer in the funeral. This is how close I am to the owner. I'm a pallbearer. So the whole idea when people think that my anger or my angst that plays out with Dan Snyder is like kind of misplaced, or I'm disgruntled, or it really had a whole lot more to do with the personal relationship than it did with anything else. And
because at one point you guys were tight, obviously, from what you're telling us.
Imagine if you and I, if any of us, right, had fallen out over some money. This happens all the time. You loan some money to somebody that you tight with, and they don't pay you back.
And act like that you never loaned it to them.
And act like, or act like something ain't right about it, and then try to play you for short. And then not only do they try to play you, but then they start talking bad about you to other people. Right? So that doesn't sit well when you know you had a strong relationship with that person. And that's kind of, I guess maybe that's the dynamic that I've always failed to mention when I talk about, because I go straight into jumping at him. I go straight at Dan Snyder. I think he's a coward. I think he's a scared little man. I think everything that he's ever done was based upon the insignificance that he had when he was growing up. That's how I used to come at him. But then I started thinking to myself, dig a little deeper, VAR, like challenge yourself, because, the fans are starting to hate me because of how hard I'm ratting on Dan Snyder. And all they can come up with is you're upset because it didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out in Washington. I would say 100% that is correct. I was upset because of the way it didn't work out in Washington, because I was always the best. I was always the best. I was the best in Pee Wee League. I was the best in high school. I was the best in college. I was the best coming into the pros. And for a time, I was the best in the league. And for things to fall apart the way that they did, based upon non-football things, non-football topics, it was all about my contract. And what I discovered was when the money was involved, when it came down to saving money or creating space for the cap, or creating space, creating more of a bottom line for what it was that they were doing, Dan Snyder was okay with sacrificing anything and anyone. Anything and anyone. I believe he would sacrifice anyone. I don't think anybody's off limits. I don't think anyone, and anything you can think of, anyone you can think of, I don't think they would be off limits to him making a bottom line, an extra dollar. And I found that out the hard way, because I had gave my loyalties, my love, my admiration, my respect, my reverence. I had given all those things to him and to our football community, because that's all I've known during my career. All I knew was to give your love, give your loyalty, give your respect, give your reverence, give your admiration, give all of that to the community and to the team and everything that's associated with it. Give it all to that. I did it in high school. I did it in college. I still do it with my college. I still do it with my high school to this day. The only level that I do not associate with is the pros. And it was because of how horrible the fracture was when I realized that business was bigger than personal when I was in the league. So to bring it full circle to what do I feel right now? What do I think right now? I'm happy. I'm happy that the fans, the people that I've grown to admire and to know and to love during my years and my time as on that team, I'm glad if they're still alive. So a lot of the people that have passed on, it's been a quarter century, for him in power. I'm just glad that people may have the opportunity to enjoy being a fan again, because I think people lose sight of the fact that we are able to escape our realities through sports. And so if my favorite thing to do is to watch my football team every weekend, and that gives me my escape away from all of the pressures that I have to deal with and all of the problems that I have to deal with during the course of my week, I don't want those fans to have to continue to not have that relief or not have that moment where they can, just enjoy a beer, enjoy the game, be happy about watching the game, be happy about supporting the team, because that is a community in itself. That is a community that matters. And so for me, when I look at this sale take place, it does mean a whole lot more to me than it probably does to a whole lot of other people, just for the simple fact that a lot of times this happens to players or it happens to people within the organization, and you never see the realities that play out that's connected to it, fellas. But in this case, this man was so bad. He was so bad that it actually all came, well, not all of it came out, but a lot of it came out, and it led to his demise as the owner of that franchise, and it led to the demise of his reputation, and that's something he earned. That's something that he earned. So I'm not piling on the dude. I think it's great for the city. I think it's great for the NFL. And I think it's a lesson to be learned here that if you think that money and power and being in charge is a responsibility that you can take lightly, it's not, because it's people's lives, it's families that are involved in all of this. And you should really, really understand that to whom much is given, much is required. And you should ultimately be accountable for being that type of a figure in an organization such as an NFL franchise. So I'll just say that I'm happy for the fans. For me, it's been so long. It's vindication for me more than anything else. But there's so much to unload for me in terms of just where this topic is. But go ahead.
I wanted to leave the topic before we got anything else. Now with Josh Harris and a new ownership group.
Yep.
Will you try to get back in with the organization that drafted you? Would you try to make things right with a fan base and just the team in general?
I have no problem reconciling. First of all, let me say this. There's nothing really to reconcile. I don't have a problem with the organization. I don't have a problem with the fans. The fans who decided to hate me after everything took place, I can understand that. You're a fan of your team, and if you're that deep with your team, you're generally going to love your team. I saw my jersey get burnt. I was called all kinds of different names when I decided that it was best for me to pay for my freedom. A lot of people may not even realize I paid $2.5 million to be able to be released from the Washington team. I wasn't released or cut because I couldn't play. I paid for my freedom. And I would have rather given back $2, $3, $4, $5 million. Now think about this now, because money is a serious thing. I would have rather given back all that money to not work for that man than to accept that money and live under the notions and the understanding of what took place and what happened and how he does things. That just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I never had a fracture with the team. I did local radio. I talked about the team. I talked about all our teams. If you ask me who my favorite teams are, first it's all DC teams, and then it's Pittsburgh. I'll never give up being a Pittsburgh fan. That's what I was raised on. I grew up on that. So my childhood teams outside of my family loving Washington was the Steelers and was the Pirates. But now, since being in Washington and the relationships I've built and the people that I know, Washington has always been my jam. My parents still live in Upper Marlboro. I got a ton of family and friends that live in the area. I always loved the community and loved the fans. That never stopped. So I don't think that it's about me needing to reconcile with the organization. I just don't know that it's a chapter that is even at this point relevant enough to reopen, TJ. If I'm being honest, like I've spoken to a couple officials from the team, and I'm open. I'm not bitter towards the team. I want to say I'm not bitter towards Dan Snyder, I generally, I'll say this. I'm bitter at how my NFL career went. I'm bitter at that because, again, when you set out to be the best that you can be and something goes wrong, and you're an ultimate competitor, you tend to run back things through your mind, what you could have done differently, how you could have done it better, so many different, angles, so many different emotions. Your family's involved in it. The conversations I've had to have, in my home, with my parents, with my spouse, with my kids. Like, there's a lot of elements here that play a part in how my pro career went. And so for me, I don't even know if it's worth reopening the door. Like, if I go in the stadium, am I getting booed? Like, if like whatever it may be, I just don't want to be in a situation where something that's old now. Like, you got to think. Like, I left Washington in 2005. I went to New York and played for the Giants. I had a cup of coffee with the Giants and with Plex and AP, and I was out. I was done. First off, my heart was broken, and maybe people don't even realize how deep this S goes with us as players. But my heart was broke, and in a way, so was my spirit as it applied to everything that I had put into being what I could be as the face of that franchise. I was the face of that franchise. I was the captain of that team. I was the guy that people depended on, that the rookies came to, and different things like that. And there was a very, very methodically thought out plan that was executed on diminishing me and assassinating me as the face of that team. And I'll always say, it's crazy. Dan Snyder brought in Joe Gibbs, told Joe Gibbs what the deal was. Joe Gibbs did it. He's a coward for doing what he did. People ask me about Joe Gibbs. I'm not a fan of Joe Gibbs because I saw how he played the game, and he bowed down to it. Instead of being a man, and he claims he's a man of God and all that stuff like that, that's fine. But he bowed down to the pressure. Greg Williams, he bowed down to the pressure. Greg Blosh, he bowed down to the pressure. Dale Lindsey, he bowed down to the pressure. All these people bowed down to what the wishes were as to how to approach. You could have just benched me and said it's a contractual issue, and when we can move on from them, we're going to move on from them. You could have did that, and that would have been what it was. But you got Joe Bugle and all these other coaches that I just named, and all these people that are coming out in the media and saying that I'm too dumb to learn defenses and I can't play. Like even when you talk about what you heard from Coach Marvin Lewis, there was a stigma placed on me by Joe Paterno coming out of Penn State that I just did what I wanted to do when I played football. Like that was a stigma because I spoke up and I spoke my truth. So people found it relevant to come at my character or discredit my intelligence because I basically, if anything, if you know me, I am as meticulous as it gets when it comes down to things I care about. And I cared about playing the game, so I always studied the game. Instead of people looking at it as a positive, that the things I was doing was based off of how much film I watched and how much prep I did and how much I took from what my coaches gave me and then took it and independently created my own type of conclusions as to how I was going to approach the game within the game plan. I was painted out to be some renegade that was a freelancer and never knew a defense. So,
but if you are a coach of that team, you're saying he's not doing what everybody else is doing. He's not doing what the defense is supposed to do. He's doing what he sees. And so can you see as a coach where they come from is, oh, we want to do X, Y, Z, but LaVar sees this, so he's going to do that.
What's interesting is when you talk about a game like this, and I've been a coach since, right? I think it's all about philosophies. So when you get into the philosophy and the beliefs and the ideas of what you represent as a coach, there are some coaches that will sit there and they will embrace a player that has independent thinking and isn't a robot. And then there are coaches that want you to do exactly what it is. So if I'm making a play because I know the tendency of what's taking place, I look at it, TJ's got a tight split. I know that TJ is about to crack this defensive end or he's coming to block me, the linebacker. I know this immediately based off of your alignment and what you do and what you don't do based off of how I've watched the film. You're not there to take an inside release to run a crossing route. You're there to crack me. So now I've watched so much film, I know exactly what the play is going to be. So within knowing what that play is, if I make a play that leads to, I don't know, it could be a change of downs, whatever it may, it could be a routine play. Nobody ever understands or realizes what took place. It only happens when you miss a play. So if I've missed a play, I would challenge people to say, for the times that I missed a play where you could sit there and be like, oh, I told you, there it is. There's the one time he messed up, he missed the play, and it's because he's a freelancer and he's undisciplined. Well, how many plays have you missed in your career, TJ? Plex, how many plays have you missed? How many mistakes have you made? Like, players make mistakes. I've never seen anybody play a perfect game or not make a mistake. Now, if you want to take it a step further and say it's because I don't know the defense, then you're inaccurate. If you want to say it's because I don't care about the integrity of the defense, then you're inaccurate. If I got fooled by a misdirection play, I got fooled by a misdirection play. And that's the thing. That's the thing about all of this is when you start to create narratives that are connected to players and then you keep pushing it and you keep pushing it and you keep driving it and you keep pushing it, people start to believe it, which is fine. Which is fine because in all this time of people calling me what they called me, Joe did it to me in college. I was the number 1 rated player coming out in our draft. Think about this now. If you want to call me a freelancer and I'm dumb and I don't know what I'm doing and this and that and the other, how many dummies you've seen go number 1, number 2, number 3 in the draft? How many dummies? I'll challenge you. You're not going to find one dummy probably in the first round. Maybe even in the second round. Now, they may be irresponsible in some of the decisions that they make, and it may lead you to make a decision in terms of you looking at their character or whatever it may be. But I'll challenge you on this. Where's my character been in question? When have I ever been a person that isn't of good character? Or somebody that doesn't do what they're supposed to do for the good of their community, their family, their team, whatever it may be. I challenge anybody to find it. So when all of these narratives have come out and have surfaced about who I was and what was representative of that, and it was all purely based off of a contractual issue that I had nothing to do with. I wasn't even in the contract negotiations. I just said do it so I could help the team. And then this is what ends up happening. It's just a lot to unload. It's a lot to unload, TJ. Plex, it's a lot to unload.
Hopefully, you got it out. Now
I ain't got it all out, but you know what I mean? But it's all good. It's all good. In the end, it's all good.